Day 42 of my pilgrimage around the 88 or 108 temples of Shikoku was a light day, but a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. It started off getting udon. Province Kagawa used to be called Sanuki, and it's famous for Sanuki udon, and there are a lot of udon restaurants around, but they're only open in the morning. The place I went for breakfast was open from 6 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. There was a line like at Chipotle, about 6:15, there was a line like Chipotle to the door, where you come and order which size of udon you want and what toppings you want on it. It was mostly men in at that time of the morning. It was tasty, but I definitely prefer kind of a sweeter breakfast than a savory breakfast. I then headed towards Bangai number 16, where I filmed yesterday's Ohenro Diary, and then headed off to Temple 67. Temple 67 was beautiful because I think it's the first temple I've been at where the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. Really quite spectacular. I then headed to Temple 70 instead of 68 and 69. I'm going to probably backtrack through 70 tomorrow, but I at least got it out of the way. I read the sutras and visited the temple. It's famous for a huge pagoda, but the pagoda is currently under reconstruction and it's all covered up, and I was unable to see it. At the temple, I met a buddy who I had met at, before Yokominenji. We had had dinner. He was one of 3 people I had had dinner with. He's going at a slightly slower pace. He's a little elderly, and it was nice to see him again, and he's going to finish up soon. I was sort of surprised to see him there. At the temple, I saw him, and then a lady called me over and said, "Read the sutras quietly." And I was a little confused. I've always been reading the sutras very genki. Generally at the temples there haven't been many people. Many Japanese kind of muddle through reading them. Some quietly, some silently, some do read it loudly. Groups always read it loudly. And as I've mentioned, I first went on the pilgrimage on a bus tour, and I was told to read it genki. So I was been reading my sutras genki, but this lady told me I shouldn't be genki. So I'm a little confused of, should you be genki, should you not be genki? It's only as a group you can be genki. When the monks from Koya-san were behind me, they were all reading them genki. They weren't quietly reading it to themselves, and they were reading it loudly. And they got me thinking, like, is it a Japanese thing? Like, by yourself, you don't want to stand out, so you have to try to read it quietly. But when you're in a group, you're protected and you can read it loudly. Kind of like at a baseball game, there are not many individual fans who just scream out and heckle things, but if you're part of the rooting group, you can be loud and boisterous and singing the entire game. I don't know. So on the bus tour, I'm hoping I have a chance to ask the Sendatsu, should I be reading a genki? Should I be reading it quietly? How should I be reading the sutras? It just got me thinking this afternoon about, I've been reading them genki because on the bus tours you read them genki, and groups of Japanese read them genki, but individual Japanese don't read them genki. Now is that, is a group bothering everyone else? Should they be reading it quietly too, or is it just individuals reading it loudly, or genki, that are being a bother? I don't know. Then from there I went to Temple 68, 69. They are one temple together. I didn't read my sutras as genki when I got there. They're near my hotel. It's kind of weird having 2 temples literally side by side. So I visited that, and then by the sea there's this giant sculpture made of sand of an ancient coin. They've been making this sand coin since the early 17th century. So I took a look at that and then headed back to the hotel. I was thinking I would get to the hotel by 1 or 2, but I didn't really end up getting back till 3. I kind of lingered, got an ice cream, and took my time. The Ohenro kind of messes with you in thinking that, oh, it's a light day. I only walked 17 miles. And looking at my steps, oh, it's only 30-some thousand steps instead of around 40,000 steps. It's still a lot, and on a day back in Sacramento, that would be an incredible amount to be walking, but on the pilgrimage, it doesn't seem like a lot if you're only walking 5 or 6 hours a day instead of 7 or 8. I got back to my hotel, and I thought I could just chill. I'd picked up my dinner, and I thought I'd just relax. I still had a couple reservations to make, and they took longer than I thought. I needed the reservations for the last Bangai and the last temple, and I had them all mapped out. I just hadn't called. And I called, and places were filled up, so I had to start changing where to go. And to get to the last Bangai again, I couldn't find any place. And then I was calling around at distant areas, and one very kind innkeeper was like, "I'm sorry, we're all booked. Have you tried this? Yes. Have you tried this? Yes. Have you tried this? Yes." And then she gave me a name of a place that also ran an inn, but they no longer run the inn. They just run a fancy hotel now. That wasn't listed in my guidebook, so I didn't know about it. And she told me to try them, and I did. And they have a space, so I'm going to stay there. It's near where I need to be. It's actually exactly where I need to be. But it is over twice as expensive as every place I've stayed so far. So it's a really expensive hotel, but it's where I need to be. And if I had gone somewhere else and cheaper, I'm sure the taxi fare to and from would be even more. So at least I have found a place, but it's rather expensive.